Hey guys, welcome back.
So a couple weeks ago we did our first impressions video on the Tilta Float. We also did a video on mounting the pendulum onto the battery plate. So we will link both of those up down below. You'll get a lot of information in those two videos that will set you up for this balancing video. So let's talk a little bit about first the camera that we're going to use, and then we're going to talk about the bracket that we use. So what camera are we operating first? Using
the A7S III with the Sony 24-105 and the Tilta matte box. Now the 24-105 lens is a zoom lens, so when you balance it, you always want to set it at a 70, which is about the halfway point to how the lens extends when you zoom. That way it just makes it easier for balancing. The other thing you want to focus on is that you make sure that if you have any NDs in the matte box, that those are either in or out as you want them, because adjusting that later could affect the balance, or if you set it up wrong beforehand, then you got to rebalance it later. The other thing you want to make sure of is that you have a battery in the camera and you have any cards you're going to use if you're recording internally. But our camera's ready to go, so I will mount it onto the float.
So of course, this is the Ronin RS2 up top, which mounts with this bracket right onto the Tilta Float.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about the bracket.
So the Pro Aim bracket that we mentioned in our first impressions video is of course the bracket we like to use. It makes balancing a lot easier because I can set up the whole float on this side and have it on standby right here. And then on this side, we have the adapter they provided mounted onto here. Now, of course, you can mount that onto any light or C-stand, but we prefer to have it on this side because that way we can do our balancing, our full balancing right here. And then the Steadicam can rest here when we're not using it or when we're not balancing it.
Right. The other thing to think about is that if you attach the pendulum as we have on the bottom, you'll no longer have that Ronin plate with the stand at the bottom to hold it upright. Also, I think we both agree that it's a little bit dangerous having just those 3 feet on the bottom and having your camera and everything on top of it. So the Pro Aim bracket allows you to dock and also allows you to balance. Now you'll also notice that we used a Condor blue arm here, and we also use a Condor blue arm here to hold our Ninja 5 recorder, and we can rest it right on there. There are little screw points on it, so you can be creative, decide what works for you. So let's get to the balancing. What's the first stages that you would do?
The next thing I want to quick discuss is that we are using the Atomos Ninja 5 monitor, so because we prefer to record externally in ProRes. So we have that mounted here on a Condor blue arm like we mentioned. So we got that monitor mounted right here, and we have it here. So next thing we do is we want to get these HDMIs on. One can go into the camera, and of course the other goes into the HDMI in on the Ninja. Once we get that plugged in, we'll be all ready for balancing. Cool, so when you're using the Pro Aim bracket, what you would first do here is you disconnect this, lift this up, and I take a step back.
And you notice, I think it's a two-person job. You have to turn these opposite, then you can turn the bracket and then tighten it back down, and then you can attach the arm onto the bracket.
Cool, so now that you have this on here, you would want to check your front and back heaviness, so I just let go. It's bottom heavy. So we want to extend that in until still a little bottom heavy.
So what you're saying is, in order for you to keep it level, you're adjusting this adjustment knob, and you're pushing and collapsing the float, making it shorter. We're making it longer, which then will help you to get this. So right now, it's still a little top heavy, would you say?
Now it's a little front heavy, so I've went a little too far, so I'm gonna extend that out a little bit. See if it stays right there.
And these are very small measurements.
I think we got it.
I think we have it. The other thing for us that's very important is that this cord has to be hanging and not obstructed. The cord is weight, and that's something that changes the entire balance.
Yes, if the cord's going to be connected while shooting, it must be there while you balance. Otherwise, your balance will not factor that in, and it will make weird things happen to your float after that. So the next thing you want to do is you want to get this so that it's tilted up and locked in place. Now that actually added a little bit to the front now that it extended the lens out there, so let me compensate for that weight. Still a little top heavy. Now a little back heavy.
And so the first night that we did this, it took us a while to figure it out, to understand how each mechanism works. We're working just with the first one for now.
Well, so we got that there. Now I'm going to ask you to hold this level for me here. That has to be keep the camera upright like that. So you need to have somebody hold it for you first, because if the back and the camera are not balanced and the camera's not balanced in the gimbal yet, it's going to be leaning to the left side. So even if the camera up here is not balanced right, it might want to try to lean this way. You want to make sure you hold that, have somebody hold that in place for you so you can get all the balancing here on your gimbal finished.
So we used to balance the gimbal first on a stand, sitting off to the side.
Yes,
then we would attach it, right?
Yes, so
we no longer do that.
Yes, I'd like to amend the first impressions video. We said to balance your gimbal as you normally would and then put it onto the float. I found I get much better results when I balance it already on the float. So this already is very front heavy. Actually, let me check if it's even got the right top heaviness. Now it's bottom heavy, so I'm going to make this adjustment here. Now, of course, when you're doing it like this, it kind of binds on you, so it can get a little tricky. So I got that here. You can also check it like this. Now it's a little top heavy. Yeah, the name of the game is incremental movements. Try this. That looks better. You always want to get, when you're balancing a gimbal, you always want to make sure the top and bottom heaviness is correct, so that way it sits looking perfectly down. Or when it's looking directly up too, although I have a matte box on, so I can't really tell if it's right when I'm doing it that way, so I have to point it directly down. So once I got that, we want to lock that in place and then make sure we go on to our front and back heaviness. So it's very front heavy at the moment because I got a matte box on it. This one's very easy. You just wind the knob back on the RS2 until it can look like this. That's not correct. So let's see if I go here. It was a little back heavy, so let's go a little forward. There. Gotta go back a smidge. Okay, we got that. We lock that in place. Next one is our roll. That doesn't look correct at all. So it's definitely a little heavy to the right, so we gotta shift it over. Now it's a little heavy to the left. Come back. You latch that just in case that's right, and then you wanna go here. Go here. So let's see. Definitely needs to go in a little more this way. Okay, so once you have your roll right, it should be able to tilt it like this and have it slowly roll back to center. Once you got that, make sure you lock it in place and lock that there. So the next one will be our pan axis, so you can let go there. I'm gonna lock this, and then I'm gonna turn the whole Steadicam like this, then I'm gonna let go. Now this one was already balanced, but this one's already good on this side. Then we're gonna take it and we're gonna flip it to this side and let go. Now, of course, on this side, it drifts a little lower just because the monitor cable is now fully extended. If it's only a little bit, that's fine. If you try to get it perfect, you're not going to, because when you turn it this way, the monitor cable is now wrapped on top and adding different weight to it. So if it's equal here and then perhaps hangs a bit lower there, that's fine. That's how you want it. Yep. Now, of course, when you want to make those adjustments, you want to make sure you unlatch this right here and shift it up and down until you get that level. But that will make balancing the back a lot easier, because once you have everything balanced as it will fly right here, you can now move on to the back.
Okay, so that now changed what's happening here. So now it wants to raise up.
Now this can actually affect the weight on the back. So once you get this right, it'll expose more flaws back here. So now it looks like it's actually a little back heavy now, so we want to make sure we collapse that back in. Oh, not enough.
That's way too much.
Yeah, it's way too much.
Pretty close.
Ah, not far. Gotta go back a little more. Add a little more weight. It's still going.
So at which step now do we turn the float on and have it get itself powered up and level?
Actually, we would be turning on the float now. So now that we got the head adjusted, we got the back now level again, it is time for us to turn on our float. And there we go, so that's now on. You have the thumb controller on, and that you're always leveling the camera, because sometimes you're doing like adjustments like this. If you notice, I can actually pan the camera a little bit. And when it does that, it can actually throw off your balance. Because you might think, oh, it's perfectly balanced, but the camera's like looking over here. And as soon as you get the camera level, everything shifts off again.
Right. Now what's interesting to me is that we just shoved the battery plate back on. We didn't even make sure it was balanced. And it's fairly close. So this is where I like to talk a little bit about the back. There are two different pieces at the back of the float, and they're like a cross. One is over top of one another. And you've got a bracket underneath from the battery plate, and then a bracket on top of the battery plate. And what this allows you to do is go right to left and up and down. So you've got the weight of a camera running all the way down the arm, right? The weight of the whole apparatus is here. You got a double V-mount in the back and a pendulum, and you have weight back here. So the one thing that I talked about in the First Impressions video was the fact that these joints tend to bind, right? So there's all this pressure on them. So we loosen them up, they start moving apart. You try to move them right and left, and they get stuck. So you have to stress relieve them and bring them up in order to be able to move them. So it looks like we are leaning a little bit maybe to this end. Now with it where it is, I probably wouldn't even mess with it. But on this one, this is right and left. So the moment I loosen this up, I have to hold from the back onto the pendulum and sort of tilt up a little bit so that I can move this from right to left. If I let it hang down without stress relieving it, it binds and it doesn't want to move. So if I loosen that up, you can see how it kind of moves back and forth. So I kind of tilt it up, and then I kind of use my fingers and I try to move it from place to place. So now it's leaning more to your side. So now we're going to push it, stress relieve it, move it back.
It's still a little this way.
We're getting closer.
You gotta come back, yeah.
So I'm actually moving the plate this way and the tilt and the float this way. So I'm going to go a little bit more.
Keep going.
I think that's about right for me.
That looks pretty good.
Now I'm going to tighten it. But when I tighten it, I also have to
You gotta lift it up again.
lift it up to unstress it,
Otherwise, it could shift on you.
or you'll think it's tight, but it's really not. The other thing, which is a fine adjustment, which I think is kind of interesting, is these little brackets here. You can turn them,
These
lift
little
them up.
knobs, yeah.
That'll send it a little more this way. And over here, you got a bracket. You can put that out a little bit more this way. A little fine adjustment. But now we're pretty much there. We're right and left
Okay,
where we need to be.
Now let's check our our top and bottom, because we did take the plate off to do the pendulum video. So we want to check here. Let me go here.
So one of the things that I think we learned, we were at a shoot at a gym, in Jersey, and one of the things that we noticed was that it was a little bottom heavy, right? And so we really balanced it so that when we let it go, it came back so nice and smooth, almost the way that you would do a Trinity.
Yeah.
If you've watched any of the Trinity videos, it's a very slow movement. Well, ours was very slow when it came back.
Yeah.
So what we learned is it really needs to be bottom heavy.
Yes.
If it's a little bottom heavy, then when you were using it, it always came back to where you wanted it in your hand. You could move it from right to left and back and forth, but it had to have a way and a memory that it wanted to come back to, or it would just want to lay anywhere.
Or it would just lay wherever I left it, and at that point I always had to be on top of it, and it was less the float helping me and more me trying to manipulate it, and you always want it to be able to return to that. So when you turn it a little this way, it always wants to go back.
The other thing to talk about is there's also, on the bracket, you can make an adjustment here.
Yeah.
We never sort of touch it once we got it set.
Yeah, once
so
we got
what
it
is that?
right. But for this one, you really just kind of want to look at where the screws are on the bottom of the Ronin, or at least the plate the Ronin mounts into, and where the center of this is here, and you just want to line those big screws up, because those screws are lined up right with the center. Best Boy Adams touched on that really nicely in his video. So when he if you ever check out his video, make sure you look at where he has his top balance, because he does a really good job of explaining that. And once we got that right, we basically didn't touch it. But the last step to make sure you got it balanced properly is you want to do up and down tosses, as I call them. So if you have an HDMI cable on with it, the toss will never fully be perfect, but what you want to focus on is that the camera is going on a straight line up. Now, if you do it slowly, it'll definitely expose some issues like here. But of course, you would never do a toss that slowly without your hand on it the whole time. So you want to make sure you're prepped for the quick tosses, like perfect line straight up, perfect line straight down. And once you have your balance right, I mean, that's basically the perfect test to make sure your balance is correct. You always want to make sure that when you throw it up to high mode, it's right there where you're expecting to grab it. And then when you drop it down to low mode, right where you'd expect to grab it here too. And that way your framing doesn't change at all while you're going from high to low mode as well. If any of you were in real estate like years ago, we always had cranes. We always loved that nice crane shot just like this. And now with the float, you can do that too. But if your float's not balanced properly, it might be a crane and a pan at the same time, or a weird pan left, pan right kind of thing, and that doesn't look good in the footage. So you want to make sure you have that toss perfect. And if there's anything wrong with the toss, even if you're trying to do it fast, that means that something needs to be balanced a little bit better. But that is the final step of the balance. Once you have that right, you can bring it back to high mode. You can take it off of here. Then you'd spin that back around. Put this back on here. Give me a little resistance there. And then we put the monitor back down right here. Okay, so now the Steadicam is balanced. A quick run through of what we just did again. We checked the camera to make sure it was ready to go. We made sure it had batteries, cards, everything it needed inside of it. We then moved the camera on top. We added the HDMI cable. We plugged it into the monitor, flipped it over to the other side, got it onto the balancing side of the bracket. We first got the back of the Steadicam extended properly so it would stay upright. We balanced the head. Of course, once we balanced the head, it was now heavier to the top side, so we had to then compensate there from the back again, as you always would. And then once we had the gimbal balanced, we turned it on, we calibrated it, and then we moved to the back. Once we went to the back, we adjust the left and right and the up and down of the battery, so that way it has a perfect kind of bottom heavy roll we want, and so that it's not tilted left or right when we're doing the toss up and down. Once we had that, we then tested it by doing some up and down tosses, made sure we had that perfect straight line. Once we had that, balancing is done, put it back on the docking side, and the next step is just to get your vest, get your arm, and get ready to go.
So that is the float balancing video. Now, if you think we've earned it, please subscribe.
And hit the bell icon for more notifications.
We'll look forward to seeing you next time.